What happens when an unstoppable force of calm meets an immovable object of chaos? When a man who's built his career on saying what everyone's thinking finally sets his sights on the most explosive target in daytime television. When decades of manufactured outrage collide with truth delivered at room temperature, what you're about to witness isn't just commentary. It's not just criticism. It's not even just a roast. This is a masterclass in controlled demolition, where the weapon of choice isn't volume but devastating truth, delivered with the precision of a surgeon and the calm of someone who's already won before the first word leaves his mouth. This is the story of how one man dismantled the most iconic talk show in America, without raising his voice, without breaking a sweat, without giving them the satisfaction of a traditional fight. Because when you're dealing with a panel that thrives on manufactured outrage, that feeds on conflict like oxygen, that turns every conversation into a battlefield, the most dangerous thing you can do is refuse to play their game. The most lethal move is to stay calm while everything around you burns. They never saw it coming, and that's exactly what made it legendary. The morning started like every other morning at The View. The studio lights hummed with their familiar electric energy, casting that perfect television glow across the iconic set. Coffee mugs clinked against saucers in the green room. Makeup artists applied final touches. Producers scurried between cameras like worker bees in a hive, headsets crackling with last-minute adjustments. Cue cards shuffled, teleprompters tested. 5 chairs sat in their familiar arc, each positioned with the precision that comes from years of repetition. Each seat a throne. Each throne occupied by a different brand of daytime television wisdom. Whoopi Goldberg settled into her center seat, with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this dance 1,000 times before. The matriarch, the moderator, the referee, the one who could shut down a conversation with nothing more than a raised eyebrow. That signature look said she'd seen it all, heard it all, survived it all, and wasn't impressed by any of it. She adjusted her microphone, straightened her notes, and exchanged pleasantries with crew members she'd known for years. This was her domain, her kingdom, her show. The other hosts found their places, each slipping into their designated role like actors in a long-running play. The energy in the studio was electric in that carefully manufactured way. Controlled spontaneity, rehearsed authenticity. The paradox that made The View what it was. Stage managers counted down. Cameras went live. The familiar theme music played. Another episode began, just like all the others, or so they thought. Miles away, in a completely different studio, Tyrus was having his own conversation. Not with them, not to them, not even about them, at least not at first. He was just speaking his mind, the way he always did, with that unbothered, heavyweight champion calm that made everything he said sound both casual and final. He sat with the relaxed confidence of someone who'd built everything from the ground up and didn't need anyone's approval to know his worth. The conversation around him flowed easily. Real talk, not performance. And then someone mentioned The View. It was innocent enough. A passing comment. The kind that usually leads nowhere. But with Tyrus, you could never tell. That's what made him dangerous. He had this uncanny ability to make surgical strikes sound like offhand remarks, to dismantle entire belief systems while sounding like he was discussing the weather. Those who knew him recognized the shift. A slight change in tone, a focused look in his eyes. This wasn't going to be just another opinion. This was going to be something else entirely. The View, he said. 2 words, low and deliberate, carrying history, observation, and judgment all at once. The air seemed to tighten. His co-host sensed it. The crew paused. Even the room itself felt different, charged with the weight of something inevitable. What began as a calm observation would soon become one of the most talked-about roasts in recent television memory, not because of shouting or spectacle, but because of how powerful truth sounds when delivered without malice or anger, when chaos is met not with rage, but with unshakable calm. Because here's the thing about confronting chaos. You don't meet it with more chaos. You don't fight fire with fire. You meet it with focus, with composure, with truth. You let them shout while you speak. You let them perform while you observe. You let them chase drama. while you dismantle it with silence and precision. You deliver truth, and nobody, absolutely nobody, did calm quite like Tyrus. The mechanism was simple but brutally effective. While The View was busy being The View, doing their daily dance of interruptions and contradictions, building their kingdom of controlled chaos, Tyrus was across town, dismantling their entire operation with the surgical precision of someone who'd been watching this circus for far too long, and finally decided to say what everyone else was thinking. "You know what The View needs?" he asked. There it was, the setup. Clean, simple, devastating in its restraint. A question that sounded genuine but was actually a loaded weapon. His co-hosts waited. The audience waited. The internet, though it didn't know it yet, was about to collectively hold its breath. They don't need to find Trump supporters. The pause was deliberate. Perfect. The silence stretched just long enough to build tension, to create space for what came next. They need to fire their race baiters. The words hung in the air like a truth bomb with a delayed fuse, not shouted, not screamed, not delivered with theatrical outrage or performative anger, just stated with the kind of matter-of-fact delivery you'd use to point out that water is wet, the sky is blue, or that the emperor, despite everyone's insistence, isn't actually wearing any clothes. But Tyrus wasn't done. He was just getting started, building his case brick by brick, each one laid with the care of someone who knew exactly what he was constructing. A master architect demolishing a house of cards. "You've had people on there before," he continued, his tone never wavering from that dangerous calm. "The kind that's more threatening than any amount of yelling. You had McCain on there. You've had people who tried to bring different perspectives, different viewpoints, different voices." Another pause. "And you ran them off." The observation cut deeper than any shouting match ever could, because it was true. Verifiably, undeniably, painfully true. And when you're dealing with truth, volume becomes irrelevant. Theatrics become unnecessary. You just state the facts and let them do the heavy lifting. "So the racist ones who want to stick to this," he said. And now the gloves were coming off. Still calm, still measured, still sounding like he was discussing the weather. Whoopi and Sunny and, what's her name, broke-ass Bette Midler. The nickname landed with comedic precision. Not cruel but cutting. Not mean but accurate. The kind of observation that makes people laugh and wince at the same time, because it's too true to dismiss, but too harsh to fully embrace. Somewhere in the View studio, you could almost feel the seismic shift. Not that they were there to hear it, not that it mattered, because Tyrus wasn't talking to them, he was talking about them. And somehow that was infinitely more devastating. The beauty of it was in what he didn't do. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't engage in the theatrical outrage that The View ran on like fossil fuel. He didn't perform. He didn't posture. He didn't pretend. He just pointed out the obvious, spoke the unspeakable, named the unnamed, and let gravity do the rest. "The weird thing about The View," he added, with that trademark dry humor, the delivery so deadpan it took a moment for the punchline to land, "is that Dylan Mulvaney is the most feminine person there." Boom. Not a shout, not a scream, not a delivery designed for applause. Just an observation with impeccable comedic timing. The kind that makes people spit out their coffee and scramble for the replay button. The room erupted in laughter, not mean-spirited cackling, but the genuine, surprised laughter that comes from hearing something so unexpected, yet so perfectly observed, that you can't help but react. Back at the View studio, business continued as usual. They had no idea what was coming. How could they? They were too busy being exactly what Tyrus was describing at that very moment. 5 voices trying to outvolume each other, each one convinced they held the moral high ground while standing in a valley of their own contradictions. Whoopi gesticulated with that commanding presence she'd cultivated over decades. The others nodded, disagreed, interrupted, performing the well-rehearsed choreography of debate as spectacle. Cameras captured it all. The audience reacted on cue. The producers monitored from the control room. Just another day at the View. But the clock was ticking. The internet was already moving. Social media algorithms were picking up the signal. Clips were being shared, screenshots taken. Tyrus's words were spreading like wildfire, catching on every branch of the digital forest, growing hotter with every share, retweet, and comment. "It's only in America," Tyrus continued, really hitting his stride now, "that a black person can sit on a TV show, getting paid millions of dollars to have the floor, to interrupt people, to speak freely, without consequence." He leaned into the irony with the precision of a surgeon making an incision, every word chosen carefully, every phrase designed for maximum impact. And then compare their life to Iran, where interrupting or speaking in public would have led to a stoning. The ignorance of it, the sheer, breathtaking ignorance. The logic was unassailable, the delivery impeccable, the effect devastating. This wasn't a roast. This was an autopsy, and Tyrus was calmly pointing out every cause of death, while the patient insisted it was still alive. "You live in a country where you might feel a certain way," he said, his tone softening just slightly. "But here's the thing about America. It's the only place where you still have opportunity, a real opportunity, a chance to succeed, to grow, to build something." He paused for effect. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what he meant. Everyone could fill in the blank. The unsaid words hung in the air, more powerful than anything he could have spoken. The escalation was complete, and the silence that followed said it all. But not in the way the View would recognize or know how to counter. There were no raised voices, no dramatic gestures, no theatrical staging. Just truth piling on top of truth, each one heavier than the last, until the weight became impossible to ignore, impossible to dismiss, impossible to deflect. "Hire them and bring people in," Tyrus continued. Now he wasn't just criticizing, he was offering solutions even as he tore down the existing structure. He wasn't destroying for the sake of destruction. He was showing a better way. Maybe you could get McCain to come back. She was a Republican, but every show and every break, she was nearly in tears because she was being attacked. That image lingered, vivid and damning. A woman driven to tears not by disagreement, but by relentless bullying. A panel so convinced of their righteousness that they couldn't see their own cruelty. So wrapped up in moral superiority that they had become the very thing they claimed to oppose. "So the problem is," Tyrus said, his voice still calm but now weighted with unmistakable gravity, "you have to go after the racist people. And if the CEO says, 'You know what? I'm not going to allow anyone on my show, man or woman, who goes after white America and talks about them like dogs. That doesn't represent our values,' and gets rid of those people, this will clear up real quick." The solution was simple, almost painfully obvious. Apply the same standards equally. Treat racism as racism, no matter who's expressing it. Hold everyone to the same ethical bar. But for the View, that was an impossible ask. It would mean looking in a mirror they'd avoided for years, acknowledging patterns they'd denied, admitting flaws they'd spent careers pretending didn't exist. "You have to actually look in the mirror and clean up your own backyard," Tyrus said, driving the point home with the calm certainty of someone who knew he was right and didn't need anyone's validation. "Get the racist people out, because that's who you allowed in. You allowed black racists on TV who could just go all day saying anything they want about white people, and nobody stops them." The double standard was laid bare, the hypocrisy exposed, the contradiction impossible to ignore. His words echoed through social media feeds, across living rooms, into conversations everywhere. People who'd been thinking the same thing for years finally had a voice, and that voice spoke with calm authority, unshaken, unflinching, refusing to be shouted down. At the View studio, the first tremors of the earthquake began to surface. Producers glanced at their phones between segments, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern to quiet panic. Social media managers watched as Tyrus's comments went viral. Views, shares, comments rising by the second. The panic grew slowly, like water seeping through a crack destined to burst into a flood. Whoopi Goldberg, veteran of countless controversies, survivor of storms, sensed something. That instinct honed by decades in the public eye. The ability to read a shift in the air before anyone else noticed. Something was off. The energy had changed, subtly but unmistakably. She couldn't name it, but she could feel it. Still, the show went on. It always did. That was the rule. The cardinal law of live television. No matter what's happening outside, the show continues inside. The thing about The View is that it's built on performative outrage. Every episode follows the same formula, the same predictable rhythm. Find a controversy, stake out positions, interrupt each other until the commercial break, then repeat the cycle. It's less a discussion and more a verbal wrestling match, except with more coffee, fewer coherent thoughts, and everyone convinced they're saving the world. And Tyrus had just pointed out the obvious, that the emperor wasn't wearing clothes, that the entire operation was built on shifting sand, that their moral authority was nothing more than selective outrage and convenient amnesia. "She has an opportunity tomorrow," he said, now referencing Whoopi directly, making it personal in a way that couldn't be ignored. "They won't fire her over this. She's too big, too established, too protected by the system. She'll have an opportunity tomorrow to come on and fix it, to clarify, to apologize, to make it right." He paused, letting the anticipation build. "Will she?" Another pause. "She won't." The prophecy landed with the certainty of experience, from someone who had seen this movie before and knew exactly how it ended. He understood the psychology, the patterns, the reflex to deflect instead of reflect. "But that's the thing about this country," he continued. "Black, white, gay, straight, short, tall, rich, poor, everyone's going to get hit with something. Everyone's going to face criticism. Everyone's going to encounter opposition." His tone softened as he built to the close. "But the beauty of this country is that there's always an opportunity to better yourself, to grow, to change, to acknowledge your mistakes, and become something better." And then came the final nail, the moment that turned commentary into history. The calm before the storm that would sweep through American media and leave The View facing a reckoning it never saw coming.